Thank you so much for coming out. It means a lot. And we're going to show a small film first before our talk, and I hope you enjoy it.
We take for granted our existence here. We kind of forget because of everyday life, trying to put food on the table and, paying the bills. We forget how we got here. The sacrifices that were made by family members in many cases. I think, we have a small room here, so I think if everybody thinks about it, within a couple of generations, we've all had families who had to leave where they used to live to come here. Mm-hmm. Anybody here born in California? Okay, woo, boy, okay. Well, that backfired. Anyway, but probably within the last couple of generations beforehand, the people came here. Why would you uproot yourself, leave your family and friends to go to somewhere totally different? Usually involves trauma. Okay? For black people in particular, it was the trauma and the terror in southern United States. For other people, it's death squads, dictatorships, economic insecurity. All these things motivate us or motivated our parents to try to figure out how to have a better life for us. Whenever I would ask my grandfather, why did you move to California? You love New Orleans. He would say, because I didn't want to raise my children under Jim Crow. And then, of course, I always say, he also told me that he didn't realize when he got here that there was James Crow Esquire that was here in Los Angeles, okay? But essentially, we all had relatives who left their homes to make a better life for us. See, it wasn't even for them. It was because my children and my children's children. And we're the fruit of that. So we have to think about that. And during certain times, there were certain struggles. I'm gonna focus in tonight more on the struggle for fair housing, which had a lot to do with the black population coming into what had been a very white, very Mormon city of Compton. I'm just gonna say this one thing before this starts so you guys have a little context. Restrictive covenants kept the black community in a small area, and it was meant to contain the population. The population, originally, how black people got on Central Avenue, was actually workers being pitted against each other, okay? Mexican-American railroad workers went on strike because they were tired of being abused. Railroad said, go on strike. We just went down south and they pulled up 2,000 black folks to take the place. Keep in mind the census for 1900 said that there were only 2,000 black people living in Los Angeles. So they roughly doubled the population in an effort for the railroad to be able to keep labor under their thumb. So the station was at 5th and Central. So the railroad said, we're gonna bring scabs in, we'll sell you houses. Because the railroad, when the government granted them land, it was a mile on each side of the track. So they built houses and they told the black rail workers, $5 down, $5 a month. And you lived here, and that's how black community got on Central Avenue. Eventually we started moving south on Central Avenue from 5th and Central to 10th and Central, where you get into the Azusa Street. You go a little further down, you're gonna get to the Dunbar Hotel by the 40s. Mm-hmm. Keep going down, you eventually get to Watts in the 50s. And keep in mind, Watts was already kind of an integrated community. Mm-hmm. You know, there were Greeks, Jews, Italians. A lot of railroad workers had come to Watts. Okay, and that's what was making up that community. About 1914, black railroad workers started coming to Watts also. So you had a population that was pretty diverse, especially for that time, because restrictive covenants weren't really used in Watts. Originally, Watts was a land grant, Ranchero Tejada, and the Watts family bought half of that land grant. So today, what we see as Willowbrook was part of the land grant that the Watts family didn't buy. Watts is what they bought. Watts had been its own city. In the 20s, it decided to be annexed by the city of Los Angeles because they were afraid that they were going to elect a black mayor. The white business community couldn't have that. The Klan, which had a local chapter right here in Willowbrook, they came up with a plan so that this guy wouldn't get elected. Sometimes when I tell these stories, I figure I should have a campfire somewhere around here. Anyway, they didn't want him to get elected, but because of the population and because he was very popular, you know, he was a businessman also, it looked like he was going to be elected. So the Klan came up with an idea. They said, you know what? We'll kidnap him, and we'll wreck his car, put it in a car wreck, pour some whiskey all over him, make it seem like he was drunk, and they actually put it on a list of things to do. And they had it listed out, and the head of the Klan had signed it. Now, the reason we know that is because the police raided the Klan's headquarters, and a sympathetic policeman gave that letter to Charlotta Bass, who printed it in her newspaper, The Eagle. Okay, so that was the plot. The Watts City Council still voted to annex them, to let themselves be annexed to Los Angeles. That was in the mid-20s. Fair housing, the ability to live in a neighborhood and raise your family in a decent place, decent housing. Billy, Black Panther Party say about decent housing. It's in the 10-point platform. Decent housing. It's a must. It's something that people were asking for. And see, here's a funny thing. People came to Compton for the decent housing, which was fairly new, okay, and the schools. Keep the mindset. People who are moving here, what do I want better for my children? Oh, they got good schools. The houses that they built at Compton at the time, we're talking about the late 50s, early 60s, were recently built, 30s and 40s. The house I grew up in was built in 47. That whole neighborhood was actually built in 47. Okay, we moved in 61. So it was fairly new, which was an oddity because usually as the black community was forced to move into neighborhoods that had already been existing for years and the housing was on its last legs. So how did we get into Compton? I'm gonna say this real quick because I don't want y'all here to midnight. This black woman named Velma Grant, at the end of World War II, excuse me, saw an opportunity. Now, Velma was up from Louisiana. Okay, everybody's migrants, we're all moving. Velma and her son saw that when soldiers, period, got out of the war, they had the GI Bill. Now that was new. That meant that you could get an education and you can buy a house as a reward for saving the world from fascism. Okay? We could have a whole conversation about the new fascists, but you know. But that's what it was. Velma Grant saw that and realized that there was a change coming. Because of restrictive covenants and redlining, I'll give you a perfect example. You go down over here around Wilmington, 124th, 125th Street, and look at those houses. They sit on very deep lots. A lot of those houses also, you can see add-ons. But those weren't professionally done add-ons. Because many of those people, when they moved in there, they couldn't get a loan to bring in a construction team to do that. They had their friends and relatives come in and we need an extra room because we got a new baby coming. We need to expand our house. So people did it themselves, which caused other problems later on when they tried to sell, because then you had issues over, coding, things like that, because people were just building the best way they could. But you see that legacy over there in 124th, 125th, all down there off of Wilmington. It's a perfect example. Velma Grant looked at the opportunity and said, you know what? Here's a need, and the need was for good housing. Her watchwords were quality construction, quality material, quality design. So she got Paul Williams, famous black architect. He's building houses for the stars. And she got him to design. What happened was she read a couple of his books. He wrote 2 books on building small homes during the war. And she read them both, and she contacted him. In those days, once you think about it, the community was a lot smaller, so everybody kind of knew everybody. So she was able to talk to one of the owners of Golden State Mutual, who happened to be related. And they talked and they said, look, this is what I want to do, is I want to build some housing, open to everybody. She was able in 1946 to get a loan from Bank of America for almost $3 million. She bought land from the Cressy family, because those of us who grew up in Compton know at one time Gonzalez Park was Cressy Park. That was because the Cressy family owned all that land, okay? They had donated the park. Gonzalez was actually a coach. I think he was a football coach for Compton High that everybody really loved. That's how they changed the name. But, and the Cressys were for it. But anyway, they sold her 190 acres. And she started building houses on it. Paul Williams designed homes. Those homes that all these yuppies are running around trying to find so they can buy and get in, they're over there. Okay, they're right off of Stanford and El Segundo. It's called George Washington Carver Manor. In 1947, she built it. On the very first day, she sold 110 houses. It's like, whew. I said that to some real estate people earlier this month, and they were like, yeah, really? 110 houses in one day. She went back to the bank. Said, I'm gonna build phase 2. So she actually built phase 2 there. And you can go, if you go in that neighborhood today, right around where Enterprise Park is, and it'll say on the street signs, Culver Manor, look at those homes as compared to the homes around them. And you can see the difference in workmanship and quality. They still look good. Here's one other little thing. There is a shopping center, most of you know it, at the corner of Avalon and El Segundo. You guys familiar? Right across the street from Eve's After Dark. Mm-hmm. She built that. Okay? Because in the 1940s, there was really nothing except oil storage on El Segundo. Matter of fact, where Centennial High School is now, they had a stable. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, she builds houses. By the mid-50s, there are 350 black homeowning families on the northwest border of a very Mormon, very white Compton. They weren't happy with that. So they came up with a group. They called it, I'm gonna be nice, keep the Negroes north of 135th Street. And they didn't say Negroes, okay? You got it. But because you had the homeowners there, things were changing. There was 1963, you have the Fair Housing Act, Rumsfeld Fair Housing Act. Starts to open up the west side of Compton. By the early 60s, we elect Douglas Dollarhide and Lionel Kay to the city council from the west side. East side of Compton is still very hostile, very white, and they're in shock because of what they saw on the west side. And what I mean by that is blockbusting, which was a tactic that the real estate people used to generate sales by scaring homeowners into selling. And it basically went like this. Mr. Richards, got a beautiful home here, but the Negroes are coming. So what I need you to do is list your house with me now, okay? Now, I'm gonna tell you, I know you're a little hesitant, okay? But I'm gonna tell you true. 6 months from now, if you wait, you're gonna wanna do it. You'll be begging me to sign these papers. The problem is gonna be, I'm not gonna be able to get you the price that you could get today. Now, Mr. Richards is seeing what's happening all around him, the other blocks. Things are changing. People don't like change, especially fast change. So he signs. Oh, real estate guy goes, oh, Bill, how you doing? What's happening, brother? I got a house, I got a willing seller right over here for you.
On table 156?
Come on over.
Behind the Enterprise?
There we go. All right? They sold by fear, destroying any chance of a stable, integrated community. You can't scare people like that, but they made money hand over fist. The banks, predatory loans, the realtors, scare tactics. And then here's another thing. A year or so ago, I did a piece for NPR. And so NPR, you know, they got researchers and everything. Mm-hmm. So they were looking at City of Compton in particular, and basically how you have Compton had its own housing collapse in the early 70s. So they were looking like, how did this happen? Well, they looked everything up, and like I said, my parents moved to Compton in 1961. So they used our experience.
Hey, how's it going? How's everything?
Not only,
awesome.
Sorry.
okay, were they doing predatory loans and everything? Thank God we didn't have a predatory loan, but a lot of people did. A lot of people had balloon payments that came due in 10 years. But they still had you pay more for your house than the market value.
Make it out.
And that's what they were showing. They said, for this house, yeah. They kicked the price up for everybody. So they were basically looting people who had
About the very project.
dreams of just having a normal family life.
Oh, awesome.
Very similar to the people who are getting hosed and dogs biting them just because they're trying to vote. And I want you to understand, okay? Yes, this place, it's predominantly happened to black folks. It happened to brown folks too. And one of the things that we're gonna have to talk about, I would love, and one of the things we actually need is to talk about the historic Chicano community, right around Sacred Heart Church, because there's history there that we really need to get into, because that predates the demographic shift when black people came into Compton. I just had to throw that in there, okay? So, but think about that. Anyway, predatory lending leads to a housing collapse in the early 70s. When you first start hearing about crime in Compton, it's juvenile crime. Because you're in a recession, interest rates 22%, people don't have jobs. The city of Compton went through a white flight, and then when you have a white flight, not only do you lose your property sales, your property tax, but a lot of the small businesses up Compton Boulevard were owned by people who lived in the city. So when they left, they took their businesses with them. So by the mid to late 70s, downtown Compton, for those of us who remember, looked like a ghost town. You could roll a tumbleweed down there and it would look like right in place. There were 3 or 4 businesses open between Willowbrook and Alameda, where at one time, I think if you look at one of the covers of the book, it's bustling. A few years before. How did these things happen? How do you turn a middle class community into a ghetto? Because see, that's why people came to Compton. The people, talking about in the black demographic, the people who were coming, and I want you to think about this. The majority of the people who ended up becoming mayor, Dollar Hyde, Lionel K.
Doris Davis.
Yeah, Doris Davis. That's another conversation. I shouldn't be dismissive, but I'm only going to say this. For those of you who read my book, you know, Doris Davis basically colluded with the Compton Police Officers Association to undermine Douglas Dollar Hyde. I'm not pointing fingers or anything. I'm just looking at the reality of it. A lot of the conversation comes directly from John Rick Baker himself, who says, I had a $2,500 and said, hey, you could be our candidate. Simply because the Compton Police Officers Association wanted to get rid of C.A.P.A, the first black police chief. That's why they figured if they got rid of Dollar Hyde, they could get rid of C.A.P.A. And they actually almost got rid of C.A.P.A, since you guys brought it up. But the people rallied in support of C.A.P.A and brought him back to his job. C.A.P.A was the one who identified, he started using scientific police tactics. He changed policing in Compton.
Oh crap,
Okay.
I heard something. I was
Basically,
like,
one of the first things he said, and people were disgruntled. First thing he did was he desegregated the police cars. He said, look, in a diverse city like Compton, we can't have 2 white policemen riding together. We have enough where you guys can kind of mix it up. They didn't like that. Then he said, look, we're not shooting people
It was cool.
unless they're
I
a danger to people around them or directly to you.
Youth employment.
Okay?
Where like
If you can't catch them, I mean, come on, they live here, we'll catch them
No,
eventually.
a young lady. She's in the 8th
They
grade.
didn't like that either.
She does everything. Her mom takes her to
Compared
everything,
to
but
other cities
this
around
employment
us,
thing is like
Compton had less
they
police
go
shooting.
through this cohort.
And the police shoot, a lot of police
they-
shootings that we
they
had
understand how to
more
create
involved the sheriff than
resumes,
Compton
how to create a
PD.
LinkedIn.
Not
and
that
things
Compton
like
PD
that,
were a
like
bunch of
understand,
angels. We used to call them
dedicate.
F Troop
And after they
for a reason. But,
they get them
you
placement
know,
for
because they had a few nuts on
So
there
it's
that
cool.
we could
Yeah,
identify
so
too.
it's
But the
like-
idea was that C.A.P.A was trying to come in with community policing before community policing.
They just reached out
was
to
even
me so that way I could like, interview them.
When you
and
had-
things
when you
like
first
that.
started hearing about
So,
crime in
yeah,
Compton?
but I'm sure that would probably be in the cards. But, yeah, it was cool.
juvenile
It really
crime.
was
It
cool.
was daytime burglary. Simply
Yeah,
because
man,
we're
you know.
talking about the early
What?
70s. Interest rates are high.
That light.
Jobs are scarce.
Like literally, I just replaced it.
As we were coming up, and we could attest, we used to go to the park as kids. It was staffed by adults.
Yep.
You showed up, you checked out your basketball, you checked out your caroms, okay? You played organized basketball. We had organized baseball, football. I'm not beefing with somebody across town from me because I'm playing basketball against them. I know him. Baseball, because when the season changed, the same kids. Except now we put the basketball down, and now we got baseball bats. But we played against each other. A whole lot of people in different parts of the city, we knew each other simply because of that. And that was taken away simply because the city couldn't afford it. You had Proposition 13, you had a loss of property tax with the collapse of the housing market, and sales tax. So you couldn't maintain the parks like we had been used to. You couldn't do the maintenance on your schools. So all the things that attracted people to Compton were taken away. How do you turn a middle class bedroom community into a ghetto? Then Compton got stigmatized as the black city. We had a black mayor, black city council, black school board, brought the first black police chief, fire chief, school superintendent. Mr. Richards here was very much involved with model cities at that time, which involved that, the very community. We had Dickinson Community Lighted School, which came out of model cities. Okay, with the idea, which I always think is a great idea, that you have an institution, a school in the community, why does it close at 3:30, 4 o'clock? Two ladies, Mrs. Blondell Filer and Dolores Zarita, came up with an idea, said we could put after school programs. Okay, Ms. Filer said we could teach music. Okay, so we had music, and back in those days, all right, everybody wanted to be the Temptations, the girls wanted to be the Supremes, so everybody had their little booths, so they had a stage. They gave us something to do to keep us off the street and not at each other's throats. These were two housewives who had kids. Pancake breakfast. We had skating parties because they were able to use the school there. So Dollar High people, they had very progressive ideas. Now I'm going to be quiet now because I'm going to let you watch this, but I just wanted to give you the context of what you're about to see. Because there were people who were very upset with the whole idea of black people running a city. Because the white supremacist narrative said that you can't do that. It's out of your wheelhouse. You guys are good with the music and the dancing, but come on. And Compton said different. And that's what you're about to see. Paul, you mind if I say a few things that include you? We use the term political prisoner loosely. You see that with Trump, and run around, everybody's political prisoner. No, they're not. They're criminals. What you were watching is, when you got closer to the end, is to realize that there was opposition. When people saw that black folks could actually run Compton, and eventually as the community is coming up, there was some very progressive things done in Compton. For instance, before the Brickyard, there was the, what's the business park? Walnut. Largest business park in California. Why did Compton have to do that? Early on, the city fathers in the city of Compton didn't really want to have heavy manufacturing in the city. You have some light manufacturing. You go down Santa Fe and you'll see some remnants of that, especially involved in the aircraft industry. I got stories about that too, but you guys don't want to be here all night. Anyway. That's what my wife keeps saying anyway. Well, okay, you guys remember Sunshine Sammy from the Little Rascal movies? There was like buckwheat and all them. Mm-hmm. Sunshine Sammy, when he was a kid, actually met Dr. Dubois, W.B. Du Bois.
Oh, wow.
While he was acting, and it left a mark on him. He did not want to be somebody's clown. As he got older, because they would have the reunions for the Little Rascals type deal, and he would tell Hunts Hall and the rest of these guys, I'm not doing any stereotypical slapstick. You know, I can forego this because he actually took the money that he made as a kid and he opened up a machine shop in Compton. Yeah, I didn't know that either. I looked and said, oh, really? All right, so there are a lot of little hidden gems. But back to what I was about to say. When Douglas Dollarhide was elected mayor, he actually ran against another black person. Mayor Crane he didn't run again. So Dollarhide actually ran against Tucker. So no matter who won, it was going to be a black mayor, okay? But Dollarhide had the experience. He had been a city councilman. Later on, of course, we know Tucker becomes mayor. But what this video was showing you was that there was opposition. I want you to think about what was going on in 1969. We had assassinations. We had the raid on the Black Panther Party headquarters on Central Avenue. They were killing people willy-nilly. All right. Those of us who were in Black Panther Party, we lost a lot of comrades during that time. COINTELPRO was very active. We just didn't have a name for it until 1971 when it was exposed. But what happened was that once they thought, because J. Edgar Hoover famously said, you know, we're going to get all the radicals off the street by 1970. Well, what happened? They started going after black politicians because what we saw was that a lot of so-called radicals were becoming involved in local politics. You know, Black Panther Party runs Bobby Seale for mayor in '73, okay? But across the country, there were other groups who were running people for local office. And Compton was a prime example. The narrative, the white supremacist narrative says that we do not have the skills, okay, the managerial skills to run a city. Well, now you have examples proving that wrong, and that can't stand. So I have to find something wrong. I just remember coming up, you'd never hear anything about Compton on the news. You know, I always say this, but I just remember a friend of mine named Michael, we sitting on the lawn with kids, we were flying kites, and that's what we were just talking about, how Compton was so boring, nothing ever really happened in Compton. And I actually remember that very clearly. After Dollarhide's elected, Compton's in the paper, it's in the news, even things around Compton that happen. All of a sudden they're in Compton, okay? What we actually saw was that the media was shaping people's ideas about not just a certain area, but about the people who lived in that area. And over time, and I want you to think of what that does. If I'm hearing that a city's incompetent and that it's crime-ridden, am I going to open a business there? Okay, kills investment. I was talking about the Walnut Business Park. The reason why they had to build that was because Compton had been losing its tax base and needed to create a tax base. And that's what they did with the business park. You know, they were not letting Compton annex these other areas close by that had some manufacturing. Just recently, when you go straight down Compton Boulevard, by the time you get to Avalon, you're not in West Dominguez, as they used to call it. You're in Gardena. Because Gardena was able to annex that area recently with all the tax dollars that comes with that. That area is full of light manufacturing. Okay, not just warehouses, but actual manufacturing. But anyway, as I was saying, real political prisoners. My friend here, Paul Richards, is former mayor of Linwood, but before he became former mayor of Linwood, or mayor of Linwood, he was active here in the city of Compton. He worked with the city council all the way back to when we were in high school, and he was on the youth council with the Model Cities program. Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, what I'd like you to do is just say if you could say a couple of words, especially around the Alameda corridor. Okay, so, yeah.
Even if I project, okay. Well, this was a beautiful documentary, and it deals with wonderful treatment of Compton's history. And we didn't hear it in this rendition, but when they questioned Mayor Dollarhide as to whether or not blacks could run a city, he went on to say, of course we can run a city. We have many of the Fortune 500 companies right here in the city of Compton. So while the downtown area was in decline, there was a reason for that too. Compton was coming up in terms of industry and was a magnet for maybe 30 or 40 Fortune 500 companies along. At first it was C.A.P.A, Capital Force. They were the initial investors, but then it became the Walnut Industrial Park. First the second largest and then the largest industrial midway in California. In Alameda, which was declining following the war because it was an industrial midway as well, all along the Alameda corridor. The Compton Forge, right? They manufactured parts and components that were made of steel, Demeanor Cordon oil, refineries. There was all types of industry. So Compton was really not in an economic decline per se, but the perception to the general public was that blacks could not manage, which was simply not true. And then in the downtown area, the Model Cities program offered a complete rebuild. The federal funds were never really sufficient because they thought Compton would belly under, but there was a new thing coming up called redevelopment. And so with this new reinvestment, Compton had more than sufficient resources to come up. But there was a seedy underbelly to a lot of what was going on. And black leaders, especially new black leaders, you've heard from Walter, and there are others like Kelvin Fowler. We grew up in the model that organizations like the Black Panthers had created, taught new officials that if you have the power, you need to do this with it. We've got a breakfast program, we've got a preschool program going on, and we don't have much of anything. But this is what you do when you have some resources, and we're making this happen with nothing. Imagine if you have the resources, you can do this too. And that was the framework, that was the model that we used when we assumed seats of power. You don't have to wait, just do if you know what to do. And organizations like the Panthers gave us that template. I won't go on, I'll answer questions as we go along, because we can go on this one.
Hold on there, because I'm have some questions. The reason I'm so glad that Paul showed up here, because usually I'll talk, but this is a rare chance. Paul actually put together so many different programs in the community. I mean, you know, the Black Panther Party chapter was here. We did a Compton neighborhood tutorial program. We did some other programs in the community, but Mr. Richards here put together a business incubator. There are several businesses that are running around here today that owe their start to Mr. Richards, okay? Because he had the foresight of putting that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was one of many projects, but we just know that businesses need an opportunity to grow and to flourish, and they need models, and they need education. And so the Development Academy took young and burgeoning entrepreneurs. Maybe, for example, you say, I want to start a Compton museum. I want to do something called Colored Compton. I've got a model, but I really don't have the resources. I mean, I can't afford the retail space. It's just off the charts expensive. Well, the Academy would afford you space, afford you the mentorship that would be required to make it a successful enterprise. And we did that with dozens and dozens and dozens of businesses. But we were able to do that because we learned from those that came before us. If you have a chance, build an incubator. If you've got a chance, build schools. If you've got a chance, do these types of things. The Alameda corridor, this depressed trainway, this was the vision, this was our vision. This was not the vision of LA County. We were on the Rail Issues Task Force years before. We learned at the feet of those who came before us in Compton. We all grew up during this era, and we knew that if we had the reins of power, we would do something with it. I work with the young Tucker. He's a doctor too. But I worked with his father. I was his chief of staff. This goes back to the 80s. I knew him when he ran the first time against Dollarhide for mayor. We created an organization in the city, Community Youth Athletic Association. There was a Watts Willowbrook Youth Athletic Association. These are parents. These are parents building community, not just the city. Even before you have the reins of city power, you had community power. And we learned again these things from activist organizations. In the early 60s, you didn't give this backstory on the Panther. He was the chair of the Compton Black Panther Party. I'm sorry.
Can you come over here and sit down? Because
I don't want to go up there.
the camera.
It's
all good. It's all love.
I just want everybody to realize, seriously, this is a rare treat, just historically, to hear about this historically. I'm just going to say this real quick. Mr. Richards did 15 years in prison because he was active for us. I want you to understand that, because he was active for us.
Till this point, I won my case in the Supreme Court. Thought I was getting, it took 5 years to get the case at the Supreme Court. Nobody gets a case up to the United States Supreme Court. Won a reversal. And the judge says, well, appeal it again, because I believe the outcome would have been different. This is incredible stuff, but it's true. My wife would tell you that I keep a copy of the certificates right on my desk, because it's just an amazing thing. The judges have the power to do what they want to do. What I was going to say, back to the early 60s, all of our neighborhoods had gangs. Businessmen, the Slauson was the largest, right? The Outlaws, the Farmers. And Compton had gangs as well. But then all of these gangs start putting down their arms and joined activist organizations, right? With SCLC, Nation of Islam, later in the late 60s, early 70s, the Black Panther Party, right? Because people had a sense of trying to do something that was right. They knew that they couldn't lay down, so they just wanted to do something positive and make a community difference. And many started running for office, right? And they assumed those offices. Example, remember the Black Panther breakfast program? Back in the early 90s, mid-90s, we created a breakfast program based on that in the city of Compton. The black majority in the Compton City Council created breakfast programs and early learning programs, which were modeled after what the Panthers were doing with limited resources. And it's an activist mindset to make a positive change. And you saw those files?
I
saw those files.
Wait. Let me say this before you say that. One of the things that we were looking to do when we had the Panther branch here, because we were looking at what the party was doing in Oakland, which was basically taking over the municipality of the city of Oakland. And of course we had designs like that too. In our youth, in our youthful zeal, what we didn't realize was that all of the top black officials had been members of the NAACP. You could have very easily said that it was an NAACP takeover of the city. And they have a certain but they have a certain ideology, tended to be more for integration and more of a diversity thing. It's a little different than what we're talking about, but that's what they thought they were moving on. And they didn't realize, or they didn't see it until, like we're saying in the video and what Petey's about to talk about, that they were being moved on just like we were.
They were.
But go ahead, Petey. Go ahead.
But these files that you hear about, this is a real thing. And I'm not trying to invite controversy, but I just speak the fact. I mentioned that we started the youth council. I started to start organizing the youth council. And Compton, young people actually had a seat at the table, a very powerful seat at the table. And this is how it came about. The median age in Compton in 1970 was 19 years of age. Median means half are older and half are younger, right? It's the dividing line. And Compton was a participant in the Model Cities program, was one of the Great Society programs. But President Johnson, his advisors, implemented a program called Maximum Feasible Citizen Participation, which meant the community had to participate in all the decision making when federal funds were involved. And so Compton had the Model Cities program, but it did not have a youth component. So how can you have viable citizen participation if there's no youth component? Well, at that time, Robert and I were classmates at Compton High School, so I get a call and the challenge of organizing the Compton Model Cities Youth Council, which we did. But what I didn't realize then was that when you're involved in some type of federal program, you're on the radar, because the Youth Council had a seat on what was called the City Demonstration Advisory Board. Now, every federal dollar spent in the city had to be approved by the City Demonstration Advisory Board. I participated on this with Mr. Ferguson, right? So
He worked with my stepfather, and when my stepfather used to come home, he'd be like, "How come you're not more like Paul?"
and we had a seat on the executive committee because the money had to be approved. The Compton City Council, sadly, Mr. Dollarhide hated this. All the members of the city council hated this because it meant shared power with the citizen participation component, right? And here, we as a youth council, we're loving this. You've heard of the Communicative Arts Academy? Yeah. Okay, so the Communicative Arts Academy was a product of the Community Action Agency, but they received no funding. But the Youth Council, we love the Communicative Arts Academy. This is where we had our dances. This is where we could get creative. We had artwork, there was dancing, there was a music program, everything. So we made sure they had funding for all of these collateral programs, because without the Youth Council's input, it would have just been an open warehouse, right? With the name Communicative Arts Academy. But we knew Judson Powell, John Outerbridge, all these persons, they loved the Youth Council because we stood up for them. You can cancel all the social programs, but you can't touch the Arts Academy. But that was an indication of the power that you have when you have a voice. And Robert and I, this was our era. And we learned from those who came before us. We're getting old, now we're gray. But these are things that we learned.
But see now we have them.
Right.
And that's why we're doing this. That's why we're telling you guys the background.
If you had the Youth Council now, for example, you're struggling to create the Compton Museum. You've been at this for a while now. I mean, putting your heart and soul. But let me give you something that came before this. Next door, there's a fire department, right? Fire station. And next door to that, there's an office building. That was my first office when I was 21 years old. Lawrence Adams, we created West Coast Industry. We had music. We had trophies. We did training. We created a national support network for career development in that building right there. And did not have the support. So I understand the struggle. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. This is a true thing. It's a law office now. But we created that because we had the heart to do it, just like you have the heart to create Color Compton. This is an important thing. But sometimes our communities become places where dreams go to die unless there's support, unless we know this history. That's why I love it every time I hear of my brother making a presentation, trying to let you understand and gain some knowledge about your past, because through that past, you can devise a pathway forward. And that's why these meetings are so important. That's why I'm so appreciative of the fact that he always answers the call. Anytime you call him out, he's there for you. And we appreciate what you're doing here, because this is an important vision for the community. So,
Thank you.
I didn't mean to go. Thank you.
You're doing the thing. Thank you. Like I said, a very rare opportunity. I keep telling Mr. Richards he needs to write his memoirs.
Yes.
We need to write about that, because that's just the tip of the spear. That's just you're seeing the tip of the iceberg. What he just mentioned to you. There's a whole conversation around the Alameda corridor, and how all the people who were involved ended up getting cases.
And you had a question.
Go ahead.
You know, you had something.
Oh, I just wanted to say my parents were one of the businesses that was on Compton Boulevard back in the late 60s and the 70s. They had Toy Paradise. Do you remember Arts Toy Fair and Toy Paradise?
Archland. They ran away.
And so they would have meetings, you know, and in support of Dollar Hyde and all of the people that were going up for election. And it was organized. It was a very organized system to get the power. So that was.
Oh yeah, just to let you know, and I talk about it in my book. And I actually got it from Rick Baker's book Vice. He talks in the first person about, and Rick Baker, for those of you who don't know, was the head of the Compton Police Officers Association. They were trying to figure out how to get rid of Cochet. They used to have their police officers meetings over here at this club used to be on Long Beach Boulevard called the Golden Garter. Anyway, it was a topless club there. And so they would have their meetings there. And there was this guy named Vito, and I always mess up his last name, but he used to always like to play, because we used to, when we were doing the breakfast program and everything, we would hit him up for donations. And of course, he was trying to make us out like we were extortionists or something, because what they would want to do is, here, we'll just give you this one-time payment, here, and go away. And we would say, we're doing this every week. Okay, well, actually, we were doing it every day. Well, one time we were doing it every other day. But anyway, as the funds and the food provided. But we were looking for business people to give us a consistent donation. We were not trying to extort people. What we were saying is that your business lives off the people in this community, and you should support them. And some businesses got it, some didn't. Of course, Vito, he played his game like he was mobbed up or whatever, but you know, he ended up contributing. But he didn't tell us, he was having the Police Officers Association meet there. And so when they were plotting against Dollar High, they were trying to figure out how to get rid of Cochet. And so Baker describes it in his book Vice about how they have a meeting, and Vito comes up and basically says, representing the White Business Association, that they would be willing to back a candidate against Dollar High financially. Well, they looked around and they saw, well, they couldn't run a white guy. They couldn't find another black person to run, a black male to run against him that would substantially change anything. I think they probably looked at Tucker, but they figured Tucker was going to do the same thing that Dollar Hyde was doing. You know, they supported Cochet. So they realized that Doris Davis, had actually supported them when they had the Blue Flu strike. And so they approached her. Vito gave according to Baker, $2,500 in an envelope, and you know, $2,500 in 1973, you know, it goes a little further than it does today. Anyway, so he went to go talk to Doris, and basically offered the support if she ran against Dollar Hyde and made sure there was no other licensing for a topless bar in Compton, so that Vito would have a monopoly. And of course, the rest is kind of history there. Hilliard Hammond and Woolfolk were put on the city council so that she would have a majority vote, and they tried to get rid of Cochet. The community rallied back to save his job. So there were a lot of things going on. There was a lot of opposition. I believe if Dollar Hyde had probably run a second term, he would have had a case. But the idea, and most of you saw it when they were showing, when Walter was talking about when he went to court, you know, they go to the federal building and there's a whole room for the city of Compton. Now, why do you suppose that was? Just think of the mentality of the time. It was like black folks captured a municipality, including the police department. At one time, they had even advocated Compton from getting, I think, certain FBI updates or whatever, because they were worried about security for the Compton Police Department. Okay? They were trying to cut them out the loop. So all these things were going on at the same time.
I came through.
This is my big bro. This is
As kids, you know, we were having
What's up, champ?
a great time being
How you
kids.
doing? How you doing, brother? Mark.
We didn't realize the storm clouds that were gathering until we got a little older.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Come through.
Walter Tucker Jr. was the first black mayor that had actually matriculated through Compton schools. There was a whole, when Mr. Richards came up, there was a whole new generation that was taking over from that generation that had come up through the NAACP. And you could tell Mr. Richards was probably a little more militant than what they would have liked. And this was a prevailing attitude. Mr. Richards wasn't out of the ordinary. This was the think at that time. Go across the country, Mayor Arrington. Okay, where was he? Like in Alabama? Birmingham, yeah. They went after him like that.
This is
Go
a
ahead.
true story. In 1992, I decided to run for
Senate.
state legislative office, and so I did a dinner at the then Compton Lasman Hotel. Right? Later became the Ramada, but there's a separate history there. But a lot of young brothers were part of this movement. We wanted to revitalize this entire area, from Carson to Inglewood, Gardena, Compton,
Solutions.
Linwood, and our mindset was just straight ahead. We knew that we could negotiate with business enterprises and bring them here more rapidly, more efficiently, and effectively than larger neighboring cities of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And so we were calling ourselves the Young Lions, and so everybody was speaking. And we took a videotape at this dinner. Everybody spoke eloquently concerning the future of this area, how we were going to uplift our communities. And we said, the Young Lions roar. And we took a photo. All the young lions in that photograph had been assailed and convicted, caught federal cases. And this is not accidental.
That's right.
And the videotape, was somehow lost, but it wasn't lost. They confiscated the videotape from that dinner and went after every person that was a part of this so-called Young Lions. And all we ever wanted to do was revitalize. And you know what? If that's your mindset, it doesn't matter what they do to you, how they try to prosecute you, how they come after you. If your heart is the same, then that can't be stopped, because you're going to do the same inside. I taught thousands of fellow inmates when I was inside. They tried to cut this down, but they realized on whole this was a better thing for the institutions that I may been doing time in. So couldn't be cut down. In fact, young brothers, even on this very day, I was in communication with them. And another thing, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This morning, my wife and I were visiting my old home in Linwood, which we've converted, we call it Harmonyville. A lot of projects, community improvement projects, creative programming, arts program, film projects. You saw the one documentary we did, 3-part Compton documentary. But before I could turn the corner, I saw a large group of people with orange vests on, maybe 20, 30 kids, right? They weren't kids, maybe high schoolers. And I said, God, you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of a program we created in the early 90s called the Tree of Life program. And the idea was this: anybody that wanted to work could work. You weren't going to make a lot of money, but you could work 10 to 20 hours a week at above minimum wage. And everybody took advantage of that. Crime went down. Gang activity went down. The community was beginning to flourish. They planted trees, cleaned streets, And so I said, that reminds me of the Tree of Life. And I drove down, and these 20 or 30 kids were with the supervisor, and they were planting trees. A concept that was spearheaded 35 years before. So the good ideas that we have, they continue. So you just stick with them, and you
That's
keep
right.
pushing. Like a Color Compton can only grow if we stick with this organization and back it up. Look at the vision. What is it that they're doing? Why are they struggling to get the resources that they need to flourish? It blows our minds, especially when we wield the political power to do better. So we have to do better. Okay.
Go ahead.
I'd like to add something on that. The ideas that happened 35 years ago are still ongoing. In 2019, I was a president of the 4th District Youth Leadership Council with our current mayor, Emma Sharif, which was restarted after a long period of no youth council. And it's still, it only lasted 3 years. The opposition that we have from higher up leadership is still ongoing today. And now it's like internally within our own communities too, where there isn't those opportunities to bridge those gaps between the youth and our city leadership, where we have to build our own communities, our own institutions like Color Compton, Compton Wellness Collective, all these other institutions that are happening outside of our city council because of the opposition that is happening from outside political landscapes and within our own community. So the same ideas, we're still trying to replicate them because we know the value within them, but it's still a resistance and a struggle within it. But we recognize that the wisdom that was passed on before is something that we need to continue to empower these spaces so we can continue to build and develop for ourselves and for future generations, and reclaim the power that was taken from us and that continues to be taken from us. Yeah, thank you for that.
I think that's why it's important. I'll just say this real quick. That's why it's important that we hear from voices like Mr. Richards here and other people, because they say, oh, history repeats itself. It kind of rhymes, but the institutions are still set up the way they're set up. You have people who've dealt with those institutions. 15 years?
Yeah. But it's
They took him off the street for 15 years.
taken off with generations.
Okay.
They really didn't take him off the street because he was in prison. Affected so many young men. I mean, it wasn't necessarily this community, but
where he was, yeah.
There, he affected many men in that system.
The interesting thing, when you go in, people know all about you. Whatever you did on the street, it follows you inside. If you snitch or if you did wrong on the street, people know. And I'm so thankful that I had a decent reputation on the street. People knew the types of things that I was doing when I was outside. And they knew that how in the world do you get sentenced to 15 years and 8 months plus 3 for nothing, right? I mean, this is a case made out of whole cloth. In fact, not only that, I'm a trained attorney, and so I investigated the investigators, and I put together an entire portfolio, from A to Z, and I knew exactly why they came after me. I knew exactly who was involved. I won't mention names. And
That's why
so
you gotta write that book.
the alternative was either put me away for a long time or put the prosecutors away for a long time. And so, the judge made his choice. But there was so much more underlying than this. But no matter. You can't have a bitter past. You have to just keep moving forward and looking straight ahead and to try to do more good. Just one more thing I want to say about the conflict our community appears to be in right now. Much of what you see is false conflict. It's contrived and it's needless because you deal with a city that appears to have too few resources, or that the resources have been depleted. But if you understand city budgets, like I do, and you understand municipalities, like I do, then you realize, you have to go to the key cost centers, which is usually public safety. And so Compton changed over years ago. It went from the Compton Police Department to the Sheriff's Department, which from a fiscal standpoint was an intelligent decision. There were a lot of things going on, but there always are, right? But you're familiar with the concept of a fool's errand, right? And a fool's errand is something like this. Robert, I'll race you to Popeye's chicken, and I bet you win. You say, Paul, come on, man. I'll be a fool because every time, all you have to do is pull back every time I take the lead. And that's a fool's errand. He can never win that bet because I really control all aspects of the race. So if you engage a regional law enforcement agency to provide public safety and law enforcement services, but you're also the law enforcement agency for neighboring cities, and you control the ebb and flow of crime within the county areas and city areas. This is a game you can't win. Right. You could double your expenditure on law enforcement. You could double your expenditure on this aspect of public safety and never reach the outcome that you want because you control nothing on that board. The point I'm making, and I'm not saying that those who serve are not doing their very best, but I am saying that if it's a game that pits cities against cities and city against county, then this is unfair. And because it's unfair, if you look at the amount of money that has been expended, that perhaps if you really analyze this, some of those resources should return. And if those resources return over the term of years you've had that situation going on, Compton will be well ahead of the game because, as a matter of fairness, the resources that we struggle to manage should be far greater. Through no fault of leadership, even though fingers go back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. And not that people can't make better decisions, they're always gonna make better or worse decisions, but the fundamental economics of the community dictate that your community deserves a rebate of some sort, and that rebate would be more than adequate to extricate the city from the depths of the economic despair that we now perceive. Because Compton has always been and always will be a great city. The people came, as you were pointing out, more than 137 years ago to this area because this is the best area and will always be the best area.
And there's something in the soil.
so that's what we need to be, and we need to move forward. I'm sorry.
No, you're great. I know a couple people have a bunch of questions. I wanted to also allow Dr. Williams to also have an opportunity if you can come up to the front. Come on. Where's the Black Panther? We're gonna knock him up. Get him up here. You know what I'm saying? My brother, I don't know, let me mic you up, man. See?
No, man, I'm 75 years old, man.
You know what I'm saying?
No, 75 years young.
I'm from the streets, you know.
You say 75 years survive.
Can I say what I want to say?
Go ahead.
That's all I want to do. I never realized how old I was till I sat back here and said, listen to all this. And I'm gonna say this from the heart, you know, from the streets. We came here in 1949 to hear you in the Uptons. We moved on Taper Street Avenue, right behind Enterprise, where West Park is, of Alondra and Central. I went to Bunch, and Enterprise,
Come on now.
Compton High School, Compton College before, El Camino, back to Compton College. I met Malcolm X in 1963. He gave me my name, William. He said, what's your name? He was on Central and Rosecrans, and that was Security First National Bank back in the days. I'm old. He said, Malcolm X is over there speaking on Central and Rosecrans. I got it right from Bunch all the way over there. And he said, what's your name? He said, my name is William James Upton. He said, no, that's your slave name. Your name is William X now. So that's how I got that name. But I'm gonna say this. Regina Chaley, Roy Caminella Park, St. Albert's, Exums. Yeah, we're gonna talk stuff now, okay?
Oh no, we go
Kings,
back to Kings. We go to Exums and get those apple caps.
Kings, where you could go get your prom clothes or whatever you wanted to buy. Even had a Compton theater across the street. Back in the day. We're going to go up a little further now. Getting rough. Price's Barbershop, where everybody went and got their hair done and everything. When you went to the prom or you went anything, Price's was the place to go.
That's right.
That's right.
Yep.
Goodyear Tire Company. And you talk about economics back in the days. Went away when white flight went away. But my mother worked there. She worked there during the World War II as one of those women, you know what I'm talking about? Rosie the River, that's right. That's right. When we moved here, Compton was Jewish. The Jewish people, when the blacks moved in, they moved to Linwood. And when the blacks moved to Linwood, they moved to the valley. Okay? So the whole aspect of it is nostalgia. That's why, to keep the Alzheimer's and the dementia from me, I lived in 90220. I went to USC. I joined the Black Panther Party after I came back from Nam because you weren't you're military, you could not join a subversive organization that was going to overthrow the government at that time, okay? So I joined afterwards. We were from San Diego. We came from Prairie View to San Diego to Compton. And that's how the situation works. So I'm going to say it again. I give my hat off to you. I'm always going to wear the gator no matter what. Some of my people became Piru, Crips, the whole aspect of it. But I didn't see color in those days. I've been shot twice, stabbed, and blown up. So the whole aspect of it is I am a survivor. But I still want to say this. Y'all almost made me cry in here tonight, and I don't never cry. But this was the best thing I've been to since we went to our thing on Saturday. And I have to give it up to power to the people, all power to the people, and take it off to, I love this. My house is still over there on Taper. And I love the city of Compton because everything I ever got, and I've said this, from Image Awards to being the first black stunt person in the film industry, to being all this, that ain't nothing. It all came from this. And every time we go on the radio show, the TV, I always say, my props to the city of Compton, because if it wasn't for the city of Compton, I wouldn't have what I have today. And that is the truth, God-given truth. Whether you are a nation of Islam, whether you are a Christian, or whether you are anything, my family came from here. And I give this city acknowledgement no matter where I'm at. I'm from Compton, and that's just the way it is.
Tell us what brought your family to Compton. Tell us what brought your family to Compton. Which brought your family out here?
Jim Crow in Bay City, Texas, back in 1945. My family, we helped founded Prairie View, but it didn't change anything. My family was sharecroppers, and they worked for Mr. John Blow, who kept them working and working and working on the land that they could never own, but they could sharecrop it. Mm-hmm. And so my great-grandfather said, no, we're going to San Diego to live in California, because Jim Crow ain't no Jim Crow there. We got here, it was Jim Crow here. And then my sister, who moved up to Altadena with the Red Line District, got her place, and they built their place up there. And then you were talking about building one over here. Yes, we built my cousin built his stuff because they had babies and they had to build a connecting house because you couldn't get no permit from the city of Compton. And then when you drive down Compton Boulevard, which is now Donald Beach Boulevard, and you got to the 110 freeway, the Gardena PD made you turn around and say, nah, if you ain't here to work or work in the gambling casinos, turn around and go back to where you belong, okay? And then we go over to the left when the city of Carson was a swamp and then incorporated in 1968. And we used to go there and shoot rabbits and quail, and that's how we got our food and everything. That's why I'm saying I'm old.
Well, don't say too old, because I remember that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So nostalgia made, thank you for bringing me up, because I use literature, I'm gangsta, I like to keep it cool. But nostalgia made me join the Black Panther Party because it was my only home and father and mother that took care of me, the 10-point program, the breakfast program, the sickle cell program. That took care of all of us back then, because COINTELPRO with Gay Edgar Hoover tried to kill us. Didn't work. yeah, I said it, Gay Edgar Hoover. Because everybody's laundry ain't all clean all the time. So the whole aspect of it is this city, and I'll say it again, that's the reason why I have it tattooed on it, because of a reason. Because I'm proud of it. Because I've never heard, I've been around the world 13 times. I've been to Siberia, I've been to Saudi Arabia, I've been to all of Vietnam, all through Southeast Asia, and guess what? They heard of the Raiders, okay? But they've heard of the city. Oh, you were in the Compton? We've heard of the city of Compton in every different language. They've heard of this city all over the world. And it ain't all negative, it's all positive. And that makes me feel good right here when I hear that. So I'm gonna let somebody else get up here and say what they gotta say. But, Bunchy told me to tell you, gonna see you March the 14th. I sent you a message.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll be looking for it.
Thank you very much.
I want it. Yes. Because I want you to.
He wanted you to sign it. He has to head out. He wanted to sign his copy.
First of all, I came late and I'm gonna leave.
I'm gonna sign it because I'm gonna give her a chance
Give
to.
this to Mark, if you can.
I got you right
I
now.
wanted to formally apologize for being late.
Oh, no problem. Just so I can, write his name, just spell his name out there. Come here, have a seat.
Yes.
One of the things. All right, you take it easy. One of the things, everybody's always saying like, looking for differences in the community. I tend to look for common ground. One of the things that we have to look at, what I tend to look at, just because I'm in the history a bit, motivations for why people come here. And like I said earlier, a lot of times you'll find that it's the same motivations. Maybe a little different geographic area, but the same motivations. So if you don't mind, I just wanted maybe to tell how you got to Compton, okay? Because I think you have a very exceptional story.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Johnson. So my family migrated to Compton. My dad and my mom, they're both immigrants who migrated from Honduras. My dad in '89 due to political asylum. He was the president of a union for worker rights in Honduras. So he was targeted by political leaders in his country, and so he had to seek refuge in America. And my mom migrated from Acapulco, Mexico in the 90s. So they met here in Compton on Bradfield and Compton Boulevard. And now we've been living there. They met there 30 years ago, and 20 years ago we ended up buying a house down the street from where they met. So it was beautiful full circle, but they, this is where they came. My mom migrated because she was the first to migrate here to create a better life and help her family back home financially as well. So for those reasons, we ended up here in Compton, and I'm really proud to be here. I know for a while when I went to college at Cal State Long Beach, I experienced a lot of microaggressions and just I was exposed to another side of the world, because living in Compton, you are kind of like secluded. Well, I felt like I didn't know the world. It was so diverse. It was a melting pot. Just going to Long Beach, which was a neighboring city, just the diversity that I faced there. But growing up in Compton, you're looked at in a negative light because of the mainstream media. And so the microaggressions just from living here that I experienced were really exposed there. But I've always been proud to be from Compton because of the resilience of our people, the richness in our soil, and the beauty that is within us, and the fight that continues for us to blossom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really need to understand that Compton has provided a haven generationally. when we saw the video, I said throw this in because I've looked at this recently. Even the majority of the white population that was here in Compton in the 50s had just gotten here. Most of them came after World War II. So, you know, there would have, if it had been done correctly, this probably would have been a very progressive, diverse community on its own. You know, it's still happening now, but it's just we wouldn't have had to deal with all the trauma, okay? But you just had greedy people who are trying to make money, all right, and take advantage off of people's desires for a better life. I mean, that's what we're looking at. That's why I like that picture when in the video where they show the bankers looking like straight gangsters, because that's what we were dealing with, you know, not bankers, but gangsters, you know, yes.
To this day.
To this day. And we need to understand that so we understand what our true environment is. Because there's too many people who are willing to try to pit us against each other. Like I said in the beginning, how did black people get on Central Avenue? Oh, they were pitting black workers against railroad workers. Not the white railroad workers, Mexican railroad workers. And they've always been doing that. You know, when we talk about like in the Detroit area with the car manufacturers, they were even more diabolical. They put together whole communities, like Inkster, Michigan. It was a community developed by the Ford Motor Company. And so when black people were coming up from the South into that area to work in the industries there, and they were forced to live in certain areas. Well, one of them was Inkster, and yes, the name was supposed to be it was a racial insult. You know, Ford, they knew what they were doing, so they built it there. But one of the things they did was they made sure they controlled the institutions in that city. They controlled the churches, and basically what Ford Motor Company and other motor companies said is, "Hey, Pastor Jones, we'll support your church as long as you don't talk that union stuff. We will actually hire people out of your church, but you have to be anti-union. Can't be for no on the integration stuff. Okay? But we'll support your church." And when I read about this a long time ago, and I'm thinking, wow, boy, that probably doesn't happen anymore. Then one day I'm sitting here looking at the news, and Second Baptist Church over here in Adams burnt, had a fire. And it came out. Disneyland was their patron. And I mean, it came out in a good way. They said, oh, we're going to send our Imagineers and they're going to rebuild the church and do all these things. But Disney has been controlling that church for years. They hire people out of that church, just like what you saw in Michigan. And I imagine that there's probably other things like that. In other words, they put their own influence in there. Don't talk union, because we see what happens to union people. Okay? These things go on today. So the things that we think are pat, no, they're not. We are seeing an administration that's about to target the Civil Rights Act. They've already come after the Voting Rights Act. If the Voting Rights Act had been intact, Trump wouldn't be in office, and neither would the majority of his minions. It just wouldn't be, because they would be able to do voter suppression and half the things that they were able to do to get into office. And it's a reason why Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was taken out in a case called Shelby, Alabama versus Holden. Okay? I'm sure Malcolm X would recognize that real tough. So these are the things it's like the fight. What did they used to say? The price of liberty is vigilance. Just because we thought we won a fight, just because we thought we were free. So now we're at a point here to just bring it back to Compton. I'm not going to keep you guys here all night. But we have to define ourselves. Okay? You can't, outside forces defined us as a black city. They'll try to define us as a brown city. But in actuality, this is a multicultural, diverse community. Don't forget the Samoans and the Asians and the other folks that also participate here. And it's so the word is community. And we have people like Mark and Abigail who are interested in serving the community. And William realizes that he knows that was the main line from the Black Panther Party.
What do you say? If it ain't.
What was that?
If it ain't.
Oh, if it ain't about unity, it ain't about shit. That's what she's telling me. And I mean, it's true. If it's not, because you see people will bring things, and if they're not bringing unity, why are we paying attention to them? Okay? Except to realize that person's suspect. But the Black Panther, I'm just going to say this and then I'm going to let y'all go home. The reason I joined the Black Panther Party, you remember Little Joe passed away last year. I was a kid. I was too young to join the Black Panther Party at first. I was 15. But they had the breakfast program. And after the murder raid on Central Avenue, the party moved the headquarters over here off of Stockwell. So they had a breakfast program over on Hickory, and they would have one on Stockwell. And some of my friends would go help out. So we were like community workers trying to help out a bit. But we weren't under party discipline because we'd show up when we wanted to. And, you know, usually we got a free breakfast. And, you know. Anyway, December 2nd, 1972. I had two friends, Keith and Cecil Faust, lived on Spruce Street, a couple blocks down from me. They had a 13-year-old sister named Marquita. Now, they had a baby brother. I don't even know if he was born yet, but you guys would know him as DJ Quick. Okay. We came home that day because we had been out and we noticed the whole neighborhood was blocked off, not by the Compton police, but by the sheriff's department. Because we used to come, we'd come right up Rosecrans, we'd make that right on a Ramby and then go to Cedar, and, you know, I lived on Cedar Street, so we'd go home. But all that was blocked off. You didn't know what was going on, so we got home. Later that afternoon, Panthers had come, they were going door to door, all through the neighborhood, explaining what had happened. How your 13-year-old neighbor, this is how to put it, how your 13-year-old neighbor was shot in the head by a sheriff's deputy while she was defending her mother who was being brutalized because they were ramming her mother's head into the side of a patrol car, trying to get her in the car. What had happened was they were supposed to be chasing two youths in a stolen car. The car, you know, stops close to the house because they were saying it was in front, but it really was in front. The two kids get out and they run. Sheriffs assumed that it was Keith and Cecil. They call themselves in hot pursuit and they go into the side door of their house. Well, these, two kids who had stolen the car didn't live there. Police kick in the side of the door, saying they had the right to do that because they're in hot pursuit. The only two people in the house was Marquita and her mother. And her mother's upset because the police just kicked in her door and come in the house. Where is, you know, they name her, where are they? What are you talking about? So they were, somehow she gets into like a resisting arrest and they trying to arrest her and she wasn't going. So with all the commotion, people in the neighborhood were coming out. More sheriffs show up. So what had happened was, as they have the mother, one sheriff's deputy's trying to get her in the car, but he keeps missing and her head's hitting the door. Okay? And people are seeing this. This is somebody's mother. People are getting a little upset. They finally get her in the car, but what happened was the sheriff's deputy who was manhandling her dropped his firearm. His firearm came out of the holster, which probably meant that the tab was off. Okay, like he was ready to shoot somebody anyway, because it shouldn't have just flew out of his holster. That's just my little extra thing. Pistol falls to the ground, and Marquita, 13 years old, bent down. And the second officer shot her in the head. Now here's the contradiction. The second officer that shot her in the head was a Negro. At that time in 1972, there was no organization that really could explain that phenomena to me, except the Black Panther Party. Because they didn't put a racial tinge on it. They said the police have a certain role in our community, and that role isn't in our favor. It's about suppression and contain. That was the correct analysis, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. But that was the correct analysis. And I looked at that and I said, oh, that's different. Because it satisfied the question I had. How do you kill a 13-year-old girl, let alone one that could easily look like your daughter? There's a mentality out there. It's an infection. And that's when I understood not the individual police officer, but what is the role of the police in our community? And how can you change that role? You know, there are police in different countries that actually have no sidearms. They're not shooting people. I mean, they have access to weapons, but they're not walking down the street intimidating people like we see here. So that's why we realize that there's a different role for the police here, especially in our community. It's not protect and serve, it's to suppress and contain. That's why I joined the Black Panther Party. That was one of the first reasonings, because I needed to understand. At the same time, Paul and other people were looking, and they were saying, look, there's an apparatus involved that we can manipulate. Of course, my stepfather and I would bump heads about that. That's why he always said, why don't you be more like Paul?